Yesterday, I did a video talking about how I can't really trust YouTube critics anymore because a lot of them are shills and sellouts. I mean, I used to be able to trust them back in the day, but nowadays it's getting harder and harder. The only critics I really trust when it comes to games and media would be Some Call Me Johnny and Thor High Heels, and those two game critics don't even really review the newest game. They usually just review whatever they want or something old. So how can you tell if a YouTube critic might be a shill or a sellout? There are a few red flags that may give it away. The first red flag would be if the YouTube critic managed to get a review copy of the game. Now, why does this YouTube critic get to have a review copy so early? YouTube has thousands of game critics that are YouTubers. What makes these ones that get the review copy so special? And I usually think they get the review copy early is because there's a good chance that it's going to be a positive review. Personally, I don't trust reviews that try to review the newest game as fast as possible, because the thing is the critic will have to rush through the game. There's a good chance that the game hasn't been patched yet, so there are going to be like bugs and stuff that the critic will either not address or will complain about because again the game hasn't been patched. Usually the best reviews are the ones that come out after the game has released. Like I'm talking about like at least a month after. Red flag number two, if the YouTube critic is way too obvious. If someone's being a shill, they gotta be as positive as possible and not say any negative things about the game that they're reviewing whatsoever. They may be contractually, that's a hard word to say, they may be contract bound to not say any mean things about the game that they're reviewing, or they could say something mean about it, but they can't be too critical. For example, Young Yu gave a very positive review of the game Cyberpunk 2077, and yeah, we all know how Cyberpunk 2077 was on release. It was awful. You know, it needed like a billion patches before the game could actually get good. So, yeah, the critic is being way too positive, way too happy with the game that they're reviewing. That's another indicator that they could be a shell. Now, I can understand a critic being way too positive for an old game. For example, right, something like Final Fantasy VII, I can understand if someone wants to do a big video on that nostalgia glazing the game because it's not the newest game out there, and there's no financial incentive to glaze Final Fantasy VII outside of having, a genuine, honest opinion on Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, if a critic is way too positive towards the newest game, then yeah, they might be a shell, especially since they didn't even have enough time to actually process or replay the newest game. Red flag number three is if the game is completely awful and it still got a positive review. This is going back to red flag number two, where the critic is being too positive. But hey, sometimes they can be a little too positive to a game that could be perceived as quote unquote objectively good. But when a game is quote unquote objectively bad, like Mixtape, and it gets all these praise reviews, that's a really good indicator that the critic is being a total shell sellout. And it's also pretty convenient too that a certain critic, well, I'm not going to skip around it, Scale Up, not only did he give the game a positive review score or a positive review, but he also just so happened to have an interview with the Mixtape creators, who are also backed up by a rich company. Very suspicious. Red flag number four, if a YouTube critic is being a shell, is that they usually surround themselves with certain things that indicate that they have a strong faith towards a specific company or whatever. So, for example, right, if someone who's big into Nintendo it does Nintendo related reviews, and they just so happen to have a bunch of Nintendo necrophilia. I probably mispronounced that. They basically have a bunch of Nintendo stuff surrounding them. That's an indicator that they could be a shill for at least Nintendo or one specific company. Arlo is usually a critic that comes to my mind. For example, he gave the Witcher 3 Switch port a positive review, and I was like, how did you even beat The Witcher 3? And why would you beat it on Switch? Like, that's the worst version of The Witcher 3 to play. And then there are those YouTube channels that are just straight up LARPing. For example, the YouTube channel Girlfriend Reviews. That's a review channel where the narrator, the girlfriend, she doesn't even really review the game. She doesn't play it. You know, she doesn't play the game that she quote unquote reviews. She just watches her boyfriend play it. Which, from what I heard in the comment, by the way, is that she doesn't even write the scripts, her boyfriend does.